Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire, I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday, November 22nd. We are heading into a delightful weekend of football, followed by an incredible week of holidays and meals and even more football. Dennis, it's about to be a pretty glorious 10 or 11 day stretch here for those of us that enjoy football or a good meal or a combination of both. Are you getting excited with Thanksgiving right around the corner?
You know, if for no other reason than football and I don't have to go to work, yes. Yes, I am. The Lions are good, which means they're going to play on Thanksgiving and be bad.
No, they're playing Chicago. I think they'll be.
Yeah, well, we can hope.
The bad game will be the middle when everybody is really settling down for Thanksgiving dinner and probably looking for something to prevent any awkward table conversation. And all you're going to have is Tommy DeVito and Cooper Rush and maybe the ceiling imploding in Dallas for all we know. But both literally and figuratively, the way the season is going. But last night, we did not have incredible weather for the Thursday night game. It was snowy, it was windy, and it was a Cleveland Browns home win. They got the 24-19 victory to get them over the Steelers. Pittsburgh came in 8-2, leading their division, fresh off a big monster win over the Baltimore Ravens. Do you think this was a little bit of a trap game for them? They looked pretty flat.
Well, I don't know if it was a trap game so much as, division rivalries often don't go the way we think they're going to go based on, like, this was Cleveland's Super Bowl last night. They were jacked up. They wanted to get a win. A lot of the pregame stuff was, talk about Myles Garrett versus TJ Watt. And it was a situation that Cleveland wanted to come out and play. Jameis said it. Jameis said, you're not really a Brown until you beat Pittsburgh. Who knew that this goofy-ass dude was going to be so dialed in to Cleveland Browns fans and ethos to pull that out? Jameis, for what, 30 interceptions, whatever it was, hasn't hardly started any games in 5 years. He's stepped into this opportunity. Is he going to end up getting a chance to start somewhere? I don't know. I think I would take him over Danny Dimes, but it looks like Pittsburgh's got a really strong defense, and it was hard to throw those moonshots that Russell throws in that blizzard. I know they wanted to do that, and I would have expected a little bit better performance out of Najee Harris, but Cleveland does have a pretty solid defense. It's been a little more up and down than I think diehard Brown fans would like to admit. But trap game, I think it was more of just, it was a rivalry game, and the Browns got up for it.
Yeah, and you're right. Jameis Winston, I think what's impressed me is he's been solid on the field, but I think we've seen it feels like a much different kind of player and locker room presence than maybe earlier in his career. And I know a lot was made when he was signed to Cleveland about, pairing him and Deshaun Watson, but maybe hopefully some of Jameis rubbed off on Deshaun Watson because he's been a delight in all these interviews.
I don't know that Jameis wanted to rub off on Deshaun Watson at all, to be clear.
Not in that way. No, not in that way. Well, that's a good segue to this week's games. There are 6 teams on a bye, a lot of fantasy-rich teams. There are some injuries that we will touch on along the way. But that really does mean every matchup counts. There are literally only going to be 26 starting quarterbacks this week. 2 of them already played, so you got 24 options left. First up on the docket, one of the better games. There are also, let me tell you, of all the weeks where there are games, this is some of them. Not a lot of incredible matchups, unlike last week where there was 3 or 4 big matchups. One of the better early window ones is the Minnesota Vikings 8-2 at the 4-6 Chicago Bears. Third game of what they said was a crucial home game, 3-game homestand for the Bears, so far 0-2. Minnesota, they're quietly, we talk a lot about Detroit and they have looked awesome, but the Vikings are hanging right there with them, just 1 game back. Sam Darnold started hot, has been a little cooler of late, but are you still kind of excited about putting him in your lineup in a week where no Joey B coming to the rescue, no Josh Allen, no Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, I think, Darnold's sitting at QB 12 on the year. And while he was a little bit hotter early in the season, that's a respectable place to be. And he's got Justin Jefferson, he's got Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Josh Oliver. So there's some receiving options in Minnesota for him. And he is a pretty mobile quarterback as well. Add to that, you're going to have a defense going up against a rookie quarterback. I feel like there's going to be some opportunities for maybe a couple short field attempts that will give Minnesota the edge. I like what Chicago's got going on with Caleb Williams. He's clearly going through some growing pains, and there's some ups and downs, but they do have a lot of talent. But Minnesota, we got Sam Darnold completing a career-high 67.9% of his passes, which is a full 6% higher than his previous career high, which is pretty phenomenal. And he's already tied his season high in career touchdown passes, or his career high in touchdown passes for a season. Boy, that first sentence structure was awful.
At least you didn't say Jameis rubbed off on somebody. So.
Yeah. I like where Darnold's at. I think he's in a good spot. Unfortunately for him, he's going to get cast aside because of J.J. McCarthy. And hopefully there's an opportunity for him, but he's likely to end up somewhere where it's not a great team and he'll suffer some regression maybe. But for this year, I think you can ride Sam Darnold as your. If I've got him as my QB2, I'm pleased as punch.
Meanwhile, for Chicago, they changed offensive coordinators. We were hoping they would get the passing game going a little bit. Last week, that seemed to pay off well for Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore. Keenan Allen was not quite as involved. He rolled his ankle in practice on Friday, which makes it even more interesting going into the weekend. But how are you feeling about the Bears receivers?
They've been a little bit disappointing. It's an extremely talented group. I'd say it's probably one of the top 8 or 9 groups in the league as far as pure talent goes. But if your offensive line isn't giving your quarterback enough time and your rookie quarterback isn't developing fast enough, it can look a little bit helter-skelter out there. And that's what we've seen. DJ Moore sitting at wide receiver 29, Rome Odunze at 49, and Keenan Allen, who's missed some time, at wide receiver 72. I love Keenan Allen and the career that he's had, but honestly, him being out is better for DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. it just narrows the funnel for them, and that makes the fantasy production that much better. DeAndre Swift has had a good year. Cole Kmet is more than serviceable as a tight end. Their big issue is they've had some injuries on the offensive line, and it was an offensive line that needed to gel at the beginning of the season because it wasn't great, and then it suffered some injuries. So it hasn't been very consistent. But, they've had some guys make some plays, namely DeAndre Swift. If Caleb Williams will continue to develop, recognize, and learn, hey, there's things I used to get away with in college that I'm just not going to get away with anymore. These dudes are bigger and faster, and I just can't kind of do that. I think he'll get better. I feel a little bit bummed for him that he's likely to have a new coach and offensive coordinator next year. So hopefully whoever comes in can have some success and is happy with Caleb Williams as their quarterback, can tailor the offense to Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze, and be successful, because we don't want them to end up like, having a revolving door at offensive coordinator like Bryce Young or Justin Fields has had. That doesn't do a quarterback any good.
I am taking the Vikings.
I tried to find every reason to take the Bears, but in the end, I just think the Brian Flores defense is going to give Caleb Williams a little bit of difficulty, and so I am taking the Vikings as well.
Next up, the 9-1 Detroit Lions at the 5-6 Indianapolis Colts. Dennis, Lions still running strong with both David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. It feels like both could be in that RB1 range. Do you like them both top 12 this week?
I think so. I mean, we've got Chase Brown out, Alvin Kamara out. Let me get back to the week, see what other good running backs are out.
Bijan Robinson is out. Breece Hall is out.
James Cook.
You said good running backs.
It's Montgomery is, let's see, RB11 on the year, so he's an RB1. Jahmyr Gibbs is RB6. So Gibbs has had 5 RB1 games and 5 RB2 games. Montgomery has had 4 RB1 games, 5 RB2 games, and 1 RB3 game. Gibbs is 4th in targets and catches on the team, and Montgomery is 5th in targets and receptions on the team. So they're not swapping them out as much as we would think. It's just Gibbs is just so much more explosive than David Montgomery. They're more of your traditional, we're going to rotate them. When they get tired, they can request a blow and the other guy will go in. But it isn't, I don't think it's a situation where they get inside the 10 and David Montgomery automatically comes in. Montgomery has deferred to Gibbs there. He recognizes that the young guy knows how to get in the end zone. And so I think you ride both of them. It's one of the few situations that I have seen at the running back position where if I had both of them on my roster, I'm happy starting them as my 2 running backs, because most weeks I'm going to get an RB1 and an RB2.
Meanwhile, for the Colts, we saw Anthony Richardson, a little bit of better passing day last week, but Lions a little different of a defense. So what are you doing with the Colts receivers?
Well, the Lions are a little bit different defense, but they've lost a lot of weapons. They've lost both of their starting defensive ends. They lost Alex Anzalone at linebacker. And as much as I love Terrion Arnold, the cornerback, he's learning the difference between college and the NFL. I think he may lead the NFL in pass interference penalties. He isn't able to kind of push them cats around like he did in college in the MAC. But the Lions defense is growing. It's getting better. Aaron Glenn has them playing really, really well. Brian Branch is playing at a very high level. I'm curious to see who fills the shoes of Alex Anzalone, and can they play at the level that Anzalone was. That being said, we got Downs at wide receiver 16, Pierce at wide receiver 34, and pitiful Michael Pittman at wide receiver 51. I feel bad for Pittman. This could have, would have, should have been a year for him to establish himself, and he just hasn't been able to get it going. When Richardson was starting the year, he just wasn't playing very well, and he wasn't connecting with Pittman. And then when Flacco came in, Pittman picked up the back injury and was limited there. Josh Downs has been the most consistent of them. We saw, I think, what Anthony Richardson can be last week. Can he be that week after week after week is the real question. I think he's getting a little bit lucky with the injuries on Detroit's defense, but I still think Detroit has enough weapons on the defensive side of the ball that they're going to give Richardson some issues. On the plus side, Downs has been target agnostic. It doesn't matter who the quarterback has been. They've been going to Downs. So I'm very comfortable starting Downs. Pierce, you're starting him as a dart throw. A.D. Mitchell, an even more desperate dart throw. And it's hard to start Pittman right now. If I'm looking at starting Pittman, I almost would rather start Mitchell because I think he has more upside. I know he's more likely to get a 0 than Pittman, but he's also more likely to catch a 70-yard touchdown than Pittman. Why did my things slide? Another thing is that all 4 of the wide receivers have at least 40 targets. So they're spreading the ball around, which can be a little challenging. Downs leads them with 72 targets. But you want a guy that's going to get 8 or 9 targets a game, but with a quarterback that may only throw the ball 20, 25 times, that's kind of difficult.
I am taking the Lions.
So am I.
Next up, the 3-7 New England Patriots at the 4-6 Miami Dolphins. How are you feeling about Hunter Henry at tight end?
So my initial reaction was, man, I love Hunter Henry. He's the only thing that you can count on there. And then when I went and looked at the numbers, he's had 5 tight end 1 games, but only 1 tight end 2 game and 5 tight end 3 games. It's feast or famine. And you just have to roll the dice. I think a function of that is, Drake May being a rookie, the offensive line having some issues. Sometimes the running game doesn't click. The wide receivers aren't the greatest group on the face of the NFL. So there's a lot of challenges. I think if you have Henry, maybe you're looking for a matchup to see, what the options are. I mean, we've got Pitts, Gesicki, Kincaid, Ingram, Taysom Hill, and Tyler Conklin all out this week. So there's a pretty good chance if you roster Hunter Henry, you're playing him.
Meanwhile, for Miami, I know for a while we were just waiting for Tua to come back to revive some of their fantasy options, but that hasn't necessarily been the tonic for Jalen Waddle. How are you feeling about him?
It's been more like arsenic for Jalen Waddle. It's been bad. He's almost unplayable. He's wide receiver 40, which makes him basically a flex play. 8 of his 10, or he's not wide receiver 40. He's wide receiver 60. But 8 out of his 10 games, he's been wide receiver 40 or worse. And if you're following along, at wide receiver 60, that means to been wide receiver 40 or worse, 8 of 10 games. That means there's some games where he's been wide receiver 80, 90, or 100 in there to get that average.
Even with Tua back, I mean, Tua's been back 4 weeks. He hasn't had a double-digit game.
And Jonnu Smith has been taking targets and making them work. So that's been a challenge. He only has 1 wide receiver 1 week. I think at best you're playing him as a flex with some upside prayer.
Yeah, he only has 1 game where he has double-digit fantasy points this season. That was week 1. He had 16.2. The highest he's been since then is he's had 8.6 a couple of times. But, yeah, it's been rough. Despite that, I am taking the Dolphins.
I'm going to get frisky and take the Patriots.
Yeah, that didn't work out for you last week, but we'll see.
No, it did not.
4-6 Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the 2-8 dumpster fire in New York. Name the Giants. It's been a long stretch, but Mike Evans, practicing in full, should be back this week. How are you feeling?
I feel good. So Evans needs 665 yards to have his 437th straight season with 1,000 yards.
7 weeks, not even 100 yards a week.
It's not. And it's not like there's a whole lot of competition for targets. Now, the running game's playing pretty well. They came out of the bye talking, hey, we got to get Sean Tucker touches in every game. Rashad White's been good. Maybe that's a function of Bucky Irving's foot being a little bit worse than initially thought. So they're going to kind of make that running back room a three-headed monster. That's not good for anybody for fantasy. But Jalen McMillan's been dinged up. Sterling Shepard's been playing well in the interim. Cade Otton has been a monster at the tight end position. But I think Evans is going to have to beat double coverage. They're going to roll coverage at him. He's going to have to make plays. But I think as long as he stays healthy the rest of the way, Baker's a my guy kind of player. And he's going to look at this situation and he's going to be like, my guy, Mike Williams, is going to get his 12th straight 1,000-yard season. God damn it, I'm going to make sure of it. I mean, what's crazy is Godwin hasn't played in 3 games and a bye and is still wide receiver 14.
Still. Meanwhile, for New York, Tommy DeVito is in as the starter. Daniel Jones is out and literally off the team as he was released today. What are you expecting from Tom DeVito?
So I went back and looked at last year. So in weeks 9 through 14, which were the games that he started and finished, he was QB 18. Now, some of that was based on his ability to run. He also had only 2 games. Only 1 game with 2 players over 6 targets. In total during those games, only 4 players had more than a 6-target game. And only 1 Giants receiver had over 82 yards receiving during that span. 4 did have over 70 yards. So there is the capacity for some production. I think if you can extrapolate a little bit of, he's got another year in the system under his belt. He's surely have to improve a little bit, but then you throw in the offensive line woes, the severe reduction in talent at the running back position.
The fact that Malik Neighbors didn't practice today because apparently he injured his groin.
Yep. So there are a lot of extenuating circumstances, and honestly, I think they're only starting DeVito unless he plays really, really well until they get to a point where they feel like, all right, Drew Lock, this is how much money you're worth because of incentives.
Well, what's interesting too is based on some of the comments, it seems like there was a fair number of people that still believed in Daniel Jones, and you wonder in that locker room. I mean, not in the front office or the.
It feels like the end of the front office there,
and the coaching staff.
Yeah.
So you could not pay me to take the Giants in this game. I am taking Tampa Bay.
So am I.
Next up, just another barn burner of a game. The 3-7 reeling Dallas Cowboys at the 7-4 Washington Commanders. Dennis, we love CeeDee Lamb, but there have been a few times where it has appeared he's a little less engaged on his team. Does that give you any pause for fantasy?
What you don't think he's engaged, standing on the sideline with his hands on his hips, saying Cooper MF and rush?
Yeah, I mean, there's been more than a few people that have noted that he seems a little checked out.
Yeah, it's been a tough year for them, and it takes, and you'd like to think that players making the amount of money they do are going to continually stay invested, but they're invested in winning. And when you're not winning, it gets hard. And when you look at the landscape ahead of you and you don't see a lot of winning happening, and then you're like, well, if we're not going to win, give me the ball every time so I can go get mine. And then you got the ball being thrown at your feet. And some of those throws Rush has made, I get that Jerry and a lot of veteran coaches have the philosophy, oh, this veteran that's played before is going to give us the best chance to win. Then you might as well have Tommy Callahan as your third string quarterback instead of Trey Lance. I think put Lance in there and just see what he can do. I don't think he's good. Honestly, I don't know that he's going to be any better for CeeDee Lamb. He may be more willing to throw Lamb YOLO balls just because he's got a better arm than Cooper Rush has. But Lamb has been wide receiver 16 over the last 2 weeks, and I'm not sure that I see that going up.
If Jerry gives us Trey Lance on Thanksgiving, he's never making the Hall of Fame. he can suck it. For the Commanders, don't look now, but Zach Ertz, tight end 7 on the season. How are you feeling about him?
I mean, he's had 6 tight end 1 games, and it's been a function of volume or touchdowns. He's not getting a lot of yardage. I mean, but we know that he's going to make some plays. He's going to get open in the short area, and if Jaden Daniels is willing to find him, he's going to catch the ball. I think you're rolling him out there, and given the options this week, you're definitely playing him. The wide receivers have been inconsistent. You've had injury throughout the running back room with Brian Robinson, and Austin Eckler hasn't been terribly efficient a lot, though he's been all right in the passing game. I think the one consistent producer in this offense has been Zach Ertz. I wish they were as good at getting the ball to Terry McLaurin as they are to Zach Ertz because, well, let's face it, Terry McLaurin runs a 4.3 and Zach Ertz runs a 6.3. Do the math.
I guess Jerry Jones is already in the Hall of Fame. We're definitely getting Trey Lance for Thanksgiving, but I'm taking the Commanders this week.
I'm going to take the Commanders as well.
9-1 Kansas City Chiefs at the 3-7 Carolina Panthers. Dennis, we've seen since he arrived, DeAndre Hopkins have a huge game last week. Xavier Worthy seemed the bigger play. How are you approaching these wide receivers?
I think that you're playing Hopkins as a possession guy that you're hoping is going to get some consistent volume, and you're playing Worthy as a big play guy, and you're hoping that when he gets the opportunity, he catches the ball because that hasn't always been his strong suit. But Worthy also gets some play in the run game on those jet sweeps. I think you're probably starting both of them at the worst as flex plays. I think Kansas City has, the offense is playing a little bit better now, despite the loss to the Bills. I think the pressure of not being undefeated is going to help and maybe even put a little chip on their shoulder. They're not bringing Pacheco back yet this week. So if your deadline hasn't passed, you still got a week. You still got some time to trade away Kareem Hunt, see if you can get anything for him. I'd love to see them stop using the 3-headed monster at the tight end position because I have a defending championship team that pretty much Kelsey is my only tight end, and I need that back-to-back because I would have been back-to-back last year, but I got robbed in the second round of the playoffs, fluke game and lost. I'd be going for my third straight title.
They're saving Kelsey for the playoffs.
But they need to save him for my playoffs. I need him.
Meanwhile, coming out of their bye, the Panthers have said Jonathan Brooks will be active. What are you expecting?
Somebody's got to bring him water and hot dogs. I mean,
well, there is no Miles Sanders is inactive. He's out this week, so.
I mean, I think that I'm not jumping on the Jonathan Brooks bandwagon until I see them do something with Jonathan Brooks. we keep hearing, oh, Brooks is coming, but they signed Chuba Hubbard to a 4-year extension, and Hubbard has been playing great. To me, it feels like it's a classic case of fantasy scout wannabe happening, and I get it. I've drafted
It's just the desperation of the running back class, I think, this year in rookie drafts. Like, if you were running back poor, this was not a good year for you to have to draft.
You know, if you're running back poor, you wanted to be trading for picks in next year's draft. That's for sure.
Yeah, because you're probably still running back homeless.
No, I hope he does well. I just don't think he's going to get the market share that we may have thought coming into the season, in part because Chuba has really stepped up and is playing really, really well now. I think he's comfortable in the offense. He's making the most of his opportunities. He's being consistent. He's being productive and efficient. And it's hard to just take that off the field for a rookie. It'd be one thing if it was Saquon Barkley coming back or Nick Chubb coming back. You're more inclined to think, well, this person is going to get, a big share of the pie. This is a rookie that hasn't done a thing in the NFL yet, and Chuba Hubbard's just signed a contract extension. I'm on my dynasty teams. I don't know if I'm even going to take Brooks off my taxi squad.
I am taking the Chiefs in this one. Next up, the 2-8 Tennessee Titans at the 7-4 Houston Texans. Don't look now, but the last 4 weeks, Calvin Ridley is up to wide receiver 7 over that stretch, seemingly getting hot at the right time with DeAndre Hopkins out of town. How are you feeling about him?
Well, so he's wide receiver 28 on the year. Since week 6, he's wide receiver 15. He's just kind of he's starting to stack the numbers week after week after week. And he was doing it. He started it with Rudolph, and now with Levis coming back. And Levis hasn't been playing too bad. And so he's starting to put it together. Nick Westbrook-Akini has stepped up across from him. Tony Pollard is kind of faded in the backfield, and Tyjae Spears can't seem to get healthy enough to stay on the field. I don't think Julius Chestnut really brings much in the way of a threat to any defense.
Spears, he's out again this week, so even in a pitiful running back week, you don't even have him.
So, Okonkwo hasn't done a lot. Tyler Boyd hasn't done a lot. So it's a pretty narrow funnel in the passing game. It's Akine and it's Calvin Ridley, and Ridley's getting a lot of targets. I think it's going to continue that way, and so I'm pretty pleased to continue to stick Ridley in my lineup.
Meanwhile, for the Texans, we have Nico Collins and Tank Dell back and going good. They were a great duo last year. How are you feeling about them this week?
I love Nico Collins. I mean, he was wide receiver 2 before he got injured. And he's still wide receiver 27 after missing 5 games. Yeah. So I think he's gonna keep rolling. I think CJ Stroud is happy to have him back and is gonna take care of him. Tank Dell, we've heard since draft day how much CJ Stroud loves Tank Dell. So we know the pecking order there. It's Collins and Dell and all you others. Dalton Schultz is going to get his.
Mixon has kind of worked him sway in there, both as a runner and as a receiver.
Yeah, Mixon is getting a giant share of the running back opportunities. But that's it. It's those 3, and then it goes to Dalton. So I like where they're at. I think Collins is he's a potential wide receiver 1 every week, and Dell is a potential wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside.
I am taking the Texans.
So am I.
On to the late window games. The 6-5 Denver Broncos at the 2-8 Las Vegas Raiders. Dennis, Bo Nix has been heating up. We've been a lot of talk that he is neck and neck with Jaden Daniels for Rookie of the Year consideration. They destroyed the Raiders when they played them a couple weeks ago in Mile High. 6 teams on the bye. QB1 this week?
He's QB1 every week.
But a QB1.
Yeah. No, he's a QB1 just about every week. He's QB7 on the year. I mean, at some point, we got to believe what our eyes are showing us. rookies and even veterans are going to have some ups and downs. We've seen it with Mahomes this year. But Nix is playing good, and he's getting the ball to Cortland Sutton, which is good. The ancillary pieces are performing. I wish we knew, like, with some certainty what was going to happen in the backfield. We don't need to spend all week hearing how Audric Estime is taken over, only for Javonte Williams to get 65% of the opportunities. But no, I think between Nix, so Nix has that Brock Purdy-ish resume from college. And by that, I mean, dude started a whole lot of games in college at major college programs. And there's no substitute for on-the-field experience. We're seeing that with Anthony Richardson. Richardson is clearly a much more toolsy player than Brock Purdy or Bo Nix. But Bo Nix and Brock Purdy come into the NFL with 55-plus games of college experience, under pressure, under fire, having to make those decisions. And so that step up has been easier for them. I think Nix has surprised me. I talked a lot of trash about him. All of his throws are at or behind the line of scrimmage, his 1 yard A-dot, yada, yada. But he's doing things that Sean Payton wants him to do in the offense. And he's getting the ball to the right guy, putting the team in a position to win. I mean, right now if it was playoff time, they'd be in right now. And I don't think we thought that, 12 weeks ago. I think we would have thought that ridiculous if one of us had said that. You would have definitely thought I was ridiculous if I said that based on your expectations. So, he's been QB5 over the last 7 weeks. I think you put him in your lineup and you keep rolling. Understand there's going to be a day when it doesn't click, and that happens for everybody. But I think he's built up the confidence now that it isn't going to carry over. He isn't. If he shits the bed this week, he's not going into next week worried about it.
Meanwhile, for the Raiders, Jacoby Myers, the best of what they have to offer at wide receiver, but that hasn't meant always robust fantasy numbers. Even in a lower options week, how are you feeling about Myers?
I don't know. I mean, he's a wide receiver 4-ish. Maybe he's got wide receiver 3 upside. It's not like he's got a lot of competition for targets. His biggest competition for targets is Gardner Minshew.
I know. I'm surprised they haven't taken a look at Desmond Ridder, but maybe we'll see him.
Then I would have said his biggest competition for targets was Desmond Ridder.
That's true. I'm taking Denver in this one.
So am I.
Next up, the 5-5 San Francisco 49ers at the 7-3 Green Bay Packers. Probably one of the better games of the day, or it would be. Brock Purdy has been ruled out. The 49ers missing some defenders as well. Deebo Samuel has not been a huge part of the game plan the last couple of weeks, despite their lack of weapons. How are you feeling about him now with Brandon Allen as his quarterback?
I mean, Deebo Samuel seems like he hasn't been a big part of the game plan all season. He's wide receiver 39. I think we've seen Juwan Jennings ascend to the wide receiver 1 role in San Francisco. Deebo is – I don't think Deebo's role has changed a lot from when Ayuk was playing. He's still the guy that – he's going to have some games where he gets more targets, but he's still the run after catch. He's the jet sweep guy. He's the take carries out of the backfield guy. So he may have the same number of opportunities as Jennings or Ayuk would have. They're just not all regular 10 to 20 yard targets down the field. But Jennings, he's averaged 7+ targets per game with 3 games in double-digit targets, and his floor has been 4 targets. But he's explosive enough to make an impact on those low-end targets. So if I'm faced with the choice of Jennings or Samuel, I'm always taking Jennings this year, right? For the rest of this year, I'm going to take Jennings over Samuel until I start to see consistency coming from Samuel. I don't know I'm going to see that with Kyle Allen. I mean, I think Allen hasn't started a game since 2022.
Brandon Allen.
Yeah, him, whatever. Doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. We do know who's starting at quarterback for the Packers, and that is Jordan Love. He had a pretty great first year as a full-time starter, but a little tougher this year. Only 62% completion on passes, 16 touchdowns, but 11 interceptions. How are you feeling about him?
So he's been QB 10 since he missed a couple games. So since he came back from injury, he's been a QB 1. It'd be nice if one of his receivers planted their flag and said, I am the alpha wide receiver 1, and you can always count on me. You know, DeAndre Hopkins, Andre Johnson, you know, that style. They've got 4 pretty good receivers, but none of them have really planted that flag and said, it's me, I'm him. I think for Love, what it is for fantasy, the guy you want is Love, not one of the receivers. You may hit on one of the receivers, whether it's Reed or Dobbs or Wicks or Christian Watson. You might hit one of those guys because it's just their week. But the guy you're going to get the most out of every week is going to be Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs, because he's a hog in the backfield.
I picked the 49ers before Purdy got ruled out, but I'll stick with them. That's
a gutsy move. I'm taking the Packers.
No, we'll see. I mean, I was almost perfect last week, so this week was bound to be a dumpster fire. Last of the late window games, 6-4 Arizona Cardinals at the 5-5 Seattle Seahawks. Dennis, we were excited about rookie wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., but it's been a roller coaster to say the least. In his 10 games, he has 5 games with 15 or more points and 5 games with less than 6 points. How are you feeling about Harrison?
I blame Kyler Murray. No.
Kyler Murray's been relatively consistent. I blame their offensive coordinator.
Because his running game, I think, is where, pumps up Murray a little bit. No, I think Marvin Harrison he's learning how to be an NFL wide receiver. He's immensely talented. One of the most pro-ready wide receivers to come into the league, but it doesn't always click when you get to the league. Sometimes you have a guy come in and everything goes great. Other times it's a bumpy ride that first year, and that's what we're experiencing with Marvin. I think part of it is they've got a really, really good running game with Connor and Benson, so they're not afraid to do that. Murray is good in the run game, so he might break off a long run for a touchdown. And then Trey McBride is going to rack up a bunch of catches and yardage. And then it ends up, so if the running game or McBride are really hitting, then it diminishes the total number of targets going to the wide receivers, and they get to spreading them out amongst 2 or 3 guys, and it just doesn't quite click. Early in the season, there was a lot of, go deep, Marv, I'll get you the ball, and it wasn't converting. And then they had a couple games where it's like, hey, run crossing patterns, and Harrison was racking up points. And they just, I'm not sure what the offensive coordinator is seeing that's making him want to go, well, I still want you to do these things that weren't as successful more than these things that have been successful. But I don't know. I think long-term, Harrison is going to be fine. I think if you are headed for your playoffs, you probably want him as your wide receiver 3 or 4.
Don't look now, but quietly, Jackson Smith-Njigba is wide receiver 10 on the season. Are you feeling more and more confident about him being a weekly start?
Yeah, I think that DK Metcalf missing a little bit of time helped Jackson Smith-Njigba establish himself as, hey, I'm that dude. He's not a huge guy. He's 6 foot, 203 pounds or something. So he's got okay size, but he's not, a 6'3", 215, but he's fast and he's quick. He's not DK Metcalf fast. I don't know if he's Tyler Lockett quick, but I think he's a nice combination of the two of them. And so he gets open and he's got really good hands and he catches the ball and he's versatile. He can play deep. He can play short. I think that Geno has kind of leaned into relying on him, and they're able to get a little balance in the game with Kenneth Walker, who's had a pretty good year when he's been able to stay on the field. And then, Metcalf does what Metcalf does. There's no denying his talent. And Tyler Lockett will still put up some numbers here and there. But, yeah, I think that on a weekly basis, you're rolling out Jackson Smith and Jigba.
I am taking the Seahawks at home.
So am I.
Sunday Night Football, the 8-2 Philadelphia Eagles at the 5-5 Los Angeles Rams. Dennis Devonta Smith was ruled out with a hamstring injury. How are we feeling about A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert in this one?
I feel great about A.J. Brown, whether Devonta Smith was injured or not. But I think it really helps Dallas Goedert. With Saquon Barkley there, Goddard has been pushed down. And without Smith, I think it's going to help Dallas Goedert. I think it also, they'll spread those second tier targets around a little bit. Barkley and AJ Brown will get theirs, and then they'll take the rest of them, and some will go to Goddard, and some will go to Calcaterra, some will go to Johnny Wilson. The other guys will have to step up. But Philadelphia has a pretty narrow funnel, and I don't think losing Devonta Smith for a game, I don't think that makes them go, you know what, now we're going to throw the ball to 9 different receivers because we lost this one. I think they still keep it pretty narrow. And so I like A.J. Brown to eat.
I mean, if Jahan Dotson was your other option, you would keep it narrow too. Meanwhile, for the Rams, since Puka Nacua came back and he and Cooper Kupp have been together, Kupp is wide receiver 4, he is wide receiver 12. But the last 2 weeks in particular, they've been red hot with Nacua as wide receiver 3 and Kupp as wide receiver 4. Are they both just top 12 plays for you the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, they're the Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery of wide receivers. I mean, Matthew Stafford is going to throw the ball. That's what he does. I know they've got Kyren Williams, and Kyron's going to get his, but Kyron hasn't. Kyron needs a couple touchdowns. They need to stop this. At least once a game, give Kyron a touchdown instead of giving all the touchdowns to Kupp and Nacua. And I say that as somebody who rosters Kyren Williams, damn it.
Let's see if you might have what you call a vested interest.
Yes, that's exactly what I have. But, I mean, Nacua and Kupp are playing great. They play off each other really well. That offense with the motion, and so they just get open, and Matthew Stafford gets the ball to him. I don't know if it's enough to, that alone is enough to propel them to win in a lot of games. It may get them into the playoffs, but I don't know if it takes them too deep. I think they just have enough holes to fill on defense and on the offensive line that they may be a one and done in the playoffs if they make it.
I'm taking the Eagles in this one.
I am too.
Yeah, Monday night is the Harbaugh Bowl. The Baltimore Ravens 7-4 at the Los Angeles Chargers 7-3 might arguably be the best of the Week 12 games. Quietly, wide receiver 8 on the season so far for Zay Flowers. How are you liking him?
I'd like him to be a little more consistent week to week. Unfortunately for Deontay Johnson, he hasn't been able to push past Rashad Bateman when the much of the talk when they acquired Johnson was, hey, it's an upgrade on Bateman.
He sucks so much.
And it has not been an upgrade on Bateman. It lit a fire under Rashad Bateman.
I mean, it hasn't been an upgrade on a piece of paper.
So,
I don't think he even had a target last week.
no, it's been bad. If you roster Deontay Johnson, he's riding the pine on your team. Zay Flowers, I think you're rolling him out there, and you know that the touchdowns may not come, and it may not be a high volume game, but he's probably going to break off at least one long reception, whether it's a short reception that he takes a long ways or whether it's a deep shot that he catches. If the Ravens are ahead, they're going to grind it with Derrick Henry. But we've seen if the Ravens are behind or it's a pressure situation and they know they're throwing, Justice Hill, man, I think he led them with 7 targets last week.
Yeah.
So they're not afraid to pull Henry and put Justice Hill in when it's obvious passing situations. I like Flowers a lot. I think he is the wide receiver you want to roster there. Are there going to be games where Nelson Aguilar catches a touchdown and goes, puts up good yardage, or Rashad Bateman catches a touchdown and puts up good yardage? Yes, but you don't know when. Flowers feels, well, I'd like even more consistency. Out of the guys on the Ravens, he's the most consistent.
Meanwhile, for the Chargers, we're back to a couple of former Ravens leading that backfield. How do you feel about Dobbins and Edwards going against their former team?
So Dobbins is sitting at RB14 on the year. And while he's a nice feel-good story, he's had some games that haven't been great, and he's had some games that have been real good, and he's had some games that were saved because he got a touchdown.
Like last week, if he hadn't gotten those 2 touchdowns, he was not looking good as a runner.
So, but I think some of that too is just the offense. But now that Edwards is back, they're sliding Edwards in there, letting Edwards do some of the 2-down grinding. But when they do that, then they're not throwing the ball to Dobbins as much as you want for him on 3rd down. The offense is starting to come around. It's interesting, Greg Roman is there. He was the architect of the early Lamar Jackson offense. And he's basically looked at Justin Herbert and said, well, I know you're 6'6" and you're 230 pounds and you run a 4.6 40. So, well, I get it. You've got a great arm. We're going to run you some too. And so I think Herbert's ran more than he has in his career. And it's been exciting. And it's allowed, I think, Quentin Johnston and Ladd McConkey and Will Dissly to sort of find their footing in that Chargers offense. And even Joshua Palmer, since he's come back from injury. I don't think any of the receivers other than McConkey are like consistent starts. Quentin Johnston is getting close, but he still has some weeks where it makes you go, yeah, I'm glad I sat him. But I think McConkey has established himself. I don't think he's a wide receiver 1. He's probably more of a high-end 3, low-end 2 on a consistent basis. But I could see next year him being a high-end, mid to high wide receiver 2.
Yeah, so Herbert so far has 182 rushing yards on 41 carries. His career high is 63 carries for 302 yards in 17 games in 2021. So I would not be surprised if he broke both marks. I am going to take the Ravens in this one.
I believe in the Ravens this year, and so I'm close to taking the Chargers. I hate Jim Harbaugh, so I'm taking the Ravens.
It does feel like a pick'em game. I don't like either. I mean, both Harbaugh is very good professional success, but I don't care for the Ravens. And I've never loved Jim. If maybe this game can end in a tie, it does feel like one of those pick'em. I just feel like Baltimore is in a more desperate position because if they got dropped to 7-5 for a team that has big Super Bowl aspiration, that's in an ugly spot. Well, that'll do it for the Week 12 slate of games. Some big games in college football tomorrow. You're going to be watching Indiana and Ohio State?
I am. OH, baby. OH. Go Buckeyes.
If you need something to fill your time before, after the game, maybe during your tailgate, what can the people do?
You can go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a subscribe and a like. And, while we don't have a show handle over there yet, you can find both of us over on Blue Sky. What's your Blue Sky handle?
Same
Nighthawk
thing. Nighthawk
7734.
Yeah.
And I'm at Culture Coach. No underscore on Blue Sky.
Hey, look.
I tried to put it in. They didn't allow it. Trying to keep it the same.
Yeah. So much for that. Now you'll have to go back. Well, just a little bit of a programming note. Next week with Thanksgiving, we are going to do our shows as normal on the days. Tuesday and Friday, we will be coming to you a little bit earlier on Friday. But during the Tuesday show, we will preview the 3 Thanksgiving Day games. And then we will be coming early in the day on Friday to get you primed for that Black Friday matchup and the rest of the week 13 action. But we will be back on Tuesday. We will recap all of week 12 and do that Thanksgiving preview. So something for you guys to look forward to. And when you're in your turkey coma, as you roll out of bed on Friday morning, you spend some quality time with your 2 favorite podcasters. So we'll look forward to seeing you.
And us.
Wow. Can't just let me take the win there. That'll do it for us this week. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend and your week 12 is a success. See you on Tuesday.